Since emotional neglect is something that our society has normalized, many of us fail to recognize the consequences of our maladaptive bonds until well into adulthood. Remember, we cannot change what we are not aware of. Do you know how your insecure attachment style plays out in your adult life? While the most accurate and in-depth method of learning about your attachment style is by exploring it with a mental health professional, taking an online quiz is a great source of inspiration that can help you become aware of your emotional responses in different situations. So if you want to know more about your attachment style, you will find a link to a quiz in the description box below. Now let's explore the 3 different sources of insecure attachments. But before we proceed, just keep in mind that even though they do have stable traits, not all of the elements of each attachment strategy that will be presented in this chapter may apply to you personally. So take it more as an overview to get you familiarized with these ideas. If you look at the insecure spectrum of attachment, at the one end of that non-secure attachment, you will find the anxious attachment style. This form of bond shows up as a strong need for connection that can be challenging for someone else to meet. People with anxious attachment are insecure in their relationships, often idolize their partner, and experience separation anxiety and fear of being abandoned. Their anxious attachment can lead them to behave in a needy or clingy way as they seek validation for their existence outside of themselves. Since their view of the world is linked to how people perceive them, they frequently display codependency, porous boundaries, and overgiving attitudes to prove their worth, which only lowers their self-esteem. They tend to experience a roller coaster of emotions and are considered highly emotional and hypersensitive. This emotional volatility can become aggressive if their wounds are triggered. If you see yourself in this description, you probably wonder why you act this way. This behavior means your caregivers were inconsistent and somewhat unpredictable with how they show their affection. Sometimes they seem overly involved, more likely because they were seeking to satisfy their own emotional needs and not yours, while other times they were too busy with something else. Perhaps your caregivers were intrusive or overprotective. The unpredictable fluctuation between being emotionally available and then distant leads you to become anxious about all your future relationships. Since you are unsure about the quality of your connections, you tend to cling on to them, often too tightly, because you fear being rejected or abandoned. You can be highly sensitive and attuned to others' needs, but question your worth in any relationship. This lack of self-esteem leads to increasingly negative self-talk that can only be soothed by validation, reassurance, or affection from others. However, this feeling doesn't last long, and you often find yourself doubting your self-worth all over again. Since the outside world dictates your value, you tend to self-sacrifice your needs to care for others' needs. You do this because you don't really know what your needs are. This is why you usually come across as indecisive and rely on others to tell you what to do. You may want intimacy and closeness, but your anxiety activates your fear of abandonment, which can lead you to feelings of jealousy and becoming suspicious in any relationship you have. You may, for instance, worry that someone doesn't care about you when you don't get a response from them quickly enough. On the other side of the insecure attachment spectrum, we have the avoidant style. People with this form of attachment fear intimacy in relationships because they find it difficult to trust others. They often feel suffocated in their connections and become emotionally unavailable as a way to distance themselves from the other person. This alienation is the reason why avoidant attachers tend to be more independent and prefer to rely on themselves. If you view the world in such a distrusting manner, you may have experienced caregivers who were not responsive to your needs as a child. Caregivers who are often dismissive, distant, or strict teaches us to constantly disregard our emotional needs, so we become emotionally disconnected from ourselves. Since they too have difficulty handling or tolerating the expression of emotions, they expect their children to be strong, tough, and independent. Your caregivers may have been physically present with you during your childhood, yet they were not generally emotionally present. And because they were emotionally reserved, it is likely that they were not aware of your emotional needs as a child. So whenever you sought out support or affection, they probably back off from fulfilling that need, which only made it worse for you because as your emotional needs increased, so too did the amount of distance from those who were meant to satisfy it. As you experience these behaviors, you learn to distrust that your emotional needs would be met by others. So you cope by relying on yourself and denying your emotional world altogether. You may appear to others as confident, highly intelligent, and independent, yet the display of high self-esteem might be an overcompensation to disguise the emotional void you feel, which explains why you may only be able to connect with others on a more superficial or intellectual level. When intimacy comes into play, you become emotionally distant, aloof, or even act defensive, as the focus of your energy is to protect yourself from a deeper connection and put up barriers to true intimacy because you fear getting hurt again. This lack of vulnerability makes it difficult for people with an avoidant attachment style to identify and understand emotions and express their feelings. If you have found that your behavior may fit both anxious and avoidant attachment style at this point in the video, you probably have developed a form of disorganized attachment. People in this category experience a mix of anxious and avoidant attachment styles. They want connection as much as they want disconnection. They need to feel loved by others and are reluctant to commit to a relationship. Why all this inconsistency? The disorganized attachment style is believed to be a product of childhood trauma in the form of neglect and abuse. If, as a child, you were abused physically, sexually, and/or emotionally, witnessed others being abused by your caregiver, you were forsaken by a caregiver that suffered from unresolved trauma, substance abuse, addiction, and/or mental illness, you learn that your care provider is a source of fear rather than a source of security and safety. Since the quality of their attention towards you was unpredictable, you have learned to develop a state of hypervigilance and/or codependency in the form of people-pleasing as a way to predict or manage what type of behavior you will encounter from your caregiver. As an adult, you tend to be more unpredictable in your behavior, as this is what was modeled for you growing up. The lack of boundaries and inconsistencies in behavior is why you may seem to have low self-esteem and high self-esteem. You can be closer and more intimate in a relationship and distrust and distance yourself from your partner. This tug-of-war also happens inside of you with your emotions, where you can experience both difficulties regulating your stress levels and managing your emotions. Your emotional range is so vast that your emotions fluctuate quickly in intensity from high to low levels to pure numbness. This instability is often the result of dissociating yourself from your body to protect yourself as a child. The roller coaster of experiences increases the chance of you becoming a control freak. Since you haven't learned any emotional skills, you tend to manipulate others to behave in ways that make you feel secure. When you don't get what you need, you often react aggressively and lack empathy. Additionally, you may attract relationships based on familiar themes, drama, conflict, and unpredictability. These connections are fueled by the push and pull behavior in which you want intimacy and connection and also fear it. For instance, as the relationship forms, you will send the message that you want to be closer to that other person. And when that connection starts to deepen, you will push away because you expect to be rejected or abandoned. It is important to realize that our early experiences with our caregivers are not the only ones that shape our attachment style. Our emotional bonds are fluid throughout life and can change depending on our life experiences and relationships. You could have developed a secure attachment style early in life and later become more insecure, depending on the quality of your relationships. For example, suppose you experience an intimate relationship where you were betrayed or somehow traumatized, and you feel your trust was broken. In that case, your view of the world as being a generally safe place may alter. As a result, your initial secure attachment may suffer some dysfunction and become more insecure due to this experience. This does not mean you can't regain a secure attachment style in your relationships. The same can be said if you learn to develop an insecure attachment style and later into adulthood you overcome the effects of emotional neglect or abuse through self-reflection, self-compassion, and understanding. How we are able to regulate our emotions, understand our feelings, and manage our behaviors all play a role in determining the quality of our emotional health. It is vital to understand and accept the fluidity of our emotional connections because they shape how we either move towards or away from people and the connection we develop with them. Because we can quickly and hedonically adapt to changes in our environment, we often don't even realize how much pain we are in and how much suffering our coping mechanisms have normalized into our experiences. Nurturing our awareness about our attachment style is essential to gain clarity about why and how we feel and respond in relationships. You can see them as a blueprint of the emotional wounds that need healing. And if we want to increase our emotional intelligence, foster deeper connections, and improve communication in our relationships, we have to be willing to explore them. So if you're ready to identify your triggers and begin healing your core wounds, we invite you to watch the next video. If you're interested in this content, please like, share, and subscribe for weekly videos and bonus content. My name is Liz, and we are on a mission to help you upgrade your emotional body through our Emotional Wellbeing series. See you in the next video.